Mainly, I want to talk about how I use Scrivener templates and outlines to work on crafting my plot within the Scrivener program. Hey everybody! If you clicked on this video, I'm hoping you're already a Scrivener user and you're looking how to up your game a little bit and maybe improve on how you can actually use that program more efficiently with your writing process. As I have mentioned before in several videos, I'm a big plotter. I use the 7-point plot structure. If you're interested a little more in that, you're in luck because I do have a video series on it, which I will link somewhere here, definitely in the description box below, so check that out if you are interested. Because I love using this process, it makes it very easy for me to translate it into Scrivener and keep everything cohesive and working. But the purpose of this video is to go into a little more detail about how I actually go about doing that. I did a video before where I kind of outlined my plot work process from start to finish, and the Scrivener bit was in there, but I got a lot of comments that seemed to be asking for a more in-depth look at the Scrivener element, which is why I'm doing this video now. It's going to be a little bit more of a Scrivener tutorial for the nitty-gritty of how I go about doing that within the program itself. Mainly, I want to talk about how I use Scrivener templates and outlines to work on crafting my plot within the Scrivener program. So in order to show this to you, I'm gonna hop on over to a screen share so that we can get into it. You ready? Let's go. All right, so the very first thing you need to do is open up your Scrivener. I have a test document here already set up and preloaded with my template that I start with whenever I'm starting a brand new novel. I will include that in the file in the description below for you to use, and at the end of this, I will show you how to use it as a template if you want to use it for future projects. So don't worry, that is absolutely there. Okay, so up first, we've got my file structure over here on the side. And I'm just closing these real quick so that I can take an overview of it. Obviously, I've got my chapters and actual area where I'm writing the manuscript up at the top. It starts with 3. Obviously, I add more the more I go along, and I have the scenes within the chapters, characters, places, etc. But in this particular video, we're going to be just focusing on plot and how I work with plot weaving specifically within my project. So I've got this whole area specifically here for weaving before I've got my individual plot threads down at the bottom. Now, I generally always start with an action thread, a love thread, main character, secondary character, and antagonist, but obviously this will change depending on what my specific story is focusing on. My stories tend to always lean heavily in action and romance, so that's why they're kind of at the top of my consideration. But depending on which particular characters I'm focusing on, I might expand and add more in here. Just depends on how many different threads I'm working on in terms of plot. And yours might differ from this as well. So like I said, I work with the 7-point plot structure. If I expand this little section, you can see I've got each of the 7 points clearly laid out here with their own individual section. And that is so that I can work on the planning and the outlining directly within here. So you can see I've got the beginning, plot turn 1, pinch 1, midpoint, pinch 2, plot turn 2, and end. Now, if I go up here to the action plot and I open it, it defaults to this kind of writing section, but we don't really want to use that. So you come up here to the top where you can look at it as a list version, and you'll see everything laid out really nicely so we can see all of the 7 points as well as their little synopsis straight away. And I have, by default, the template itself over here in the synopsis area. You do have to click on the specific thing, but it will show what you should be putting in the synopsis, and that is where anything you'd be putting on an index card, essentially the outlining of what's happening at that particular plot point. And for the first one here, it's what's the starting state for this particular plot thread. And I have this for each of those major plot points. For instance, plot turn 2, a reminder you need to fill this out, and what the plot turn 2 should be, which is the call to action, inciting incident. Same for pinch 1, what happens to put pressure, and you can keep going fully down the list. I've got each of the 7 points laid out here, ready to go and ready to be filled in with my story. Now, another way I like to keep these designated is I will give each individual thread their own emoji. And I will also label them with the particular plot thread that I'm working on. So you can see down here, I've got the love plot. Again, it opens there. We go to the list version and you can see I have this little heart here. I've got it labeled as love. It's pink. So everything is color coordinated so that I can keep it organized within my own mind. And this becomes even more important when you actually start to do the weaving, because all of those icons and labels and things makes it easier for you to keep track of which particular threads you're having happen at the same time. So if I go back to the action, I'm laying it out of the list. I just want to briefly go over how you actually go about labeling these and putting the icons on there. So you can right click in either section, either here or within there. Right click obviously on what you want to be changing, and I'm going to show you directly in here if I can get it. So you right click, you go to label, and you can see right here I have action, and it is orange to correspond with the icon and kind of the color coding. I've got, again, all my main threads here, so if you're adding new threads, you want to make sure to add them within here. And you can do that specifically by clicking on edit, which is right here. And if I go in there, I see a full layout again. You can click this little plus sign or the minus to get rid of it. It'll automatically pop up a new one. You can type in the label, you double click on the little circle here, and it will pull up a little palette, a little color palette, and you can do any color that you want so that you can keep it fully organized and well done. Click the little minus just to get rid of any that you don't want on there. And you don't have to keep these just plot threads. You can do more than that as well. So then we come back here, and just to take a look at the icon, which I find super helpful, you can right click again, and there's this option called change icon. It comes with all these preset ones within Scrivener, but you can also use emojis, which I really love, and it'll show you your most recently used ones there. You can come up here and click icon from text, and you will be able to use any emoji that you can use on your keyboard. Mine automatically pops up here. I do use a MacBook. I think there might be a difference between MacBook and Microsoft in terms of what you can use. If you type it straight in here, you can copy from anywhere. Anything that's in a text, you can actually paste right in here, and it will pull in as an emoji for your specific thing that you want to designate. And they also have this little emoji part here. So it might show all of these emojis on both Microsoft and MacBook. So I'm changing this to a little clap just so you can see how easy it is just to switch it over. I'm going to change it back to the mind-blowing because I think that's better for my action plot. And I just make sure that they're all the same in there so I can keep them designated visually. For my main characters, I like to use these little flags. I just kind of color coordinate. If you want to use your own emojis, go for it. But this is how I kind of keep things straight in my own head. And of course, each of them has the main 7 plot points within each of my plot threads. Then once you've gone in here and you've filled out each of the synopsis for each of the 7 points, let me just put in some filler here so you can kind of get, so the beginning, the hero is stagnant and living at home. That's the beginning state, right? Plot turn 1, let's come in here and place this. The wizard arrives and tasks them with saving the world. All right. And you'll just go through each of the plot points. I'm not going to fill all those out. You get the gist of it for your particular story and plot threads. You'll come in here and we are ready to do the weaving. So if I click on weaving and I go to the list form, you can see immediately I've got folders here. So I've got beginning and end. Generally, I keep folders for each of the main events that is happening along the line of the story. This will usually correspond with my action plot. It will depend on what is happening. So if you want a folder to comprise any type of plot points that are occurring, and whether or not those are happening in alignment with your action plot is really dependent on your individual story. So now comes the time where we actually do the physical weaving. So we're going to be moving each of these plot points up into the folders that need to happen. And you don't necessarily click and drag, because if you do that, it's going to leave your action plot folder entirely, and then you kind of lose sight of it. And I like to be able to segregate them. So if I want to look at just my action, I keep it there. So in order to keep them in both places, I right click, copy to, and I find where it's going to go, plot, weaving, and it's going to go in beginning. So the beginning of the action plot happens in the beginning folder of the plot weaving. Same for the love, that's probably beginning is going to correspond there as well. Pop that in there. And then you can see they both end up in there. So if I go and create a new folder in the plot area, and this will correspond again with maybe like a big part of action. So maybe the wizard arrives for this section. And the plot turn 1, which we have the wizard arrives and brings the call to action, essentially. So we're going to right click, copy that over into the wizard arrives section. And maybe that corresponds at the same time with the main character plot turn 1, because that's their call to action, right? So we're right clicking, copying over into that particular folder. But you know what? Maybe the beginning of the love plot actually should be when the wizard arrives. Maybe the wizard is the love interest, who knows? But you would move it around to where that it's in the particular folder you want it to be. And then I just continue this process with all of the other elements. So the pinch 1 maybe is also for the antagonist is also when the wizard arrives, because the bad part for that particular antagonist is when the wizard calls our main hero to action, right? So then you can go up to the weaving and look at this at a glance in the list format, and you can see all of these elements that we've pulled over, and you will see the plot point as well as the synopsis. Now these have the synopsis of the template, but once you fill them all in, it will give you a bird's eye view of everything that is happening in your story, and so you can keep it fully organized, ready to go, ready to write. So you would go through here and maybe add a new folder for every kind of main plot situation that's happening, where you're going to have more than one plot point or even one plot point in a particular section. So maybe this is a big fight with an ogre comes after the wizard arrives, right? What's going to be happening in there? Maybe pinch 1 of the action plot, because that's when things get real. They have to fight a big ogre. We'll copy that over into there. And you can see it shows up right there. And then we've got the synopsis over here as well. You could edit that, obviously, so that it makes more sense. Also, maybe plot turn 1 for the love plot, the romance plot happens during that ogre fight. Maybe our main character is saved. Maybe their main character saves somebody else, and that's a big part of them starting to fall in love. That could also be happening at the same time, and you'll see that they both show up here copied over into there. So I know that those elements are happening simultaneously. And maybe during this ogre fight is a secondary plot. So maybe it's the beginning or the plot turn 1. We're introducing a new character. That could also happen at the same time. I'm actually going to make it the beginning. So we're going to copy that over into the big fight with the ogre. And then we can see how we are weaving, things are overlapping, and you can go through this whole process with all of the 7 points of each of your major plot threads. Then we go back to weaving, look at it as a list, and you'll see everything laid out. You'll see the labels, you'll see the synopses. It will be very easy to visualize from start to finish the entire plot so that you can work on this and shift them around even if you need to. So then I'm ready for when I actually start working on the manuscript, come over here to the actual writing element. I will divide this into 2 panes, 2 window panes, right? So I'm going to type in just some general text here. I'm typing my manuscript. And then in one pane I'll be working, the other pane I will open up the list version of my plot weaving so I can see at a glance what I'm specifically writing at that moment in time, which plot elements need to be covered in the scene that I'm working on, or if I need to divide it into multiple scenes in order to cover all of those plot elements happening at that point in time of my novel. And then one of the last things I wanted to talk about is when I'm working on a particular scene, I can actually use that color coding structure to help me a little further. So I can designate a label for a scene that will allow me to see at a glance maybe the perspective of who I'm writing from, because I do usually have multiple points of view in my novel, and this allows me to better organize that. And I can use these labels that I've already created to keep everything straight in my mind. So when I'm looking at it at a glance, I can see who's talking, how much of a balance I have between points of view, and make sure that I'm designating it. And if we go to list view, you'll see it right here under the label section, and it will show up with the color and with the specific designation. So if I create maybe a new scene here, I label it as a secondary character, go back to folder view, I can see main character, secondary character, purple, green. It's very easy for me to break down this on a chapter to chapter level. And if I go to the manuscript as a whole, I can also see it in there. If I wanted to even label a chapter, I could do that as well, which is really nice. And it keeps the cohesion of the labeling system throughout the whole work. Now, the last thing I wanted to talk about was how to actually save this as a template for use in the future so that you can open it brand new and fresh. So make sure you do this from scratch before you even make any edits. So you need to work off of the file that I have provided for you. Don't make any changes to it before you do this. So then you'll open it, you'll hit File, Save as Template, and then it should open up this option. I always save the styles into the template as well. Title it however you want, but 7-point template works great. And then you hit OK. I'm gonna hit cancel because I already did that. But then once you follow those prompts and go to create a completely new project, you pick a template and it should show up here. In all, you'll see 7-point template. This is where it will go. You can also find it in the fiction area because we saved it as a fiction. Just double click on it and designate a title, click create, and it should pop right up with all of the elements that you'll need to get started with plot weaving within Scrivener and everything that we just went over. So there you go, a full breakdown of how I used all that plot work, all of that effort that I've put in, translated into Scrivener, and visualize my plot laid out in full. So what do you think of this process? Do you use some other elements of Scrivener that I'm not using? Do you have any recommendations? How do you work with your plot and translate that into a digital form? I am always fascinated to hear what other people are doing so that I can improve on my craft, because I'm sure the things that I'm doing right now are not going to be the things that I'm doing in 5 years, right? Like, writing is an evolutionary process. We're constantly learning, either from reading books, listening to our favorite authors, or talking to each other. So I'm trying to open a bit of a dialogue so that we can learn from each other. I hope that you enjoyed today's video as always, and maybe found it a little entertaining, a little educational. You know that I always aim to please. If you did, please hit that like and subscribe button so you can stay up to date on everything new that I'm putting out. Thanks so much for joining me today, and until next time, I will see you later. Bye!